In last week's video on my YouTube channel, the Film Optimist, I discussed the history of movie novelizations. If you look into novelizations, they can be hard to track down. Some can be very expensive, but used copies, when you can find them, for the most part can be found fairly cheap, thanks to the sheer numbers that were printed. But novelizations do tend to be an ephemeral thing. Unless the movies, television shows, or games that they are for manage to make it to becoming a multimedia empire, a lot of times the books will just fade into obscurity along with the movie, TV show, or whatever else they were based on. Toward the end of the video, I brought up writer Alan Dean Foster and the massive number of novelization and tie-in projects he's worked on, and there's more to the story than I felt I could organically include in the video. So today, let's take a look at Alan Dean Foster and the business of novelization. Born in New York City, New York, United States in 1946, Alan Dean Foster's family would move across the country to Los Angeles, California, where he would come up through school. He would graduate from UCLA with a bachelor's degree in political science in 1968, and in 1969 he would receive his MFA in cinema, also from UCLA. Straight out of college, he would pick up work with an advertising and PR firm in Studio City, where he would be employed for the next 2 years as he began writing and submitting stories. In 1971, Foster wrote a long letter to August Derleth's The Arkham Collector, a magazine published out of Sauk City, Wisconsin, that had an estimated print run of 2,500 copies for every issue. In the letter, Foster told a fictional story of a mysterious artifact in a Lovecraftian voice. Foster says it was a surprise when he was contacted by Derleth, who purchased the letter to publish as a short story. Foster's Some Notes Concerning a Green Box would appear in the summer 1971 issue of The Arkham Collector. And while he recalls it as his first print sale, it would be published after his story With Friends Like These saw print in Analog Science Fiction and Science Fact. The same year, he would also publish Why Johnny Can't Speed in Galaxy magazine, and in 1972, he would publish his first novel, The Tarim Krang, with Ballantine. The Tarim Krang was a completely original manuscript that also launched Foster's own creations, the Human X Commonwealth, and the characters of Pip and Philip Lynx, or Flinks. Foster would follow up with 2 more books set in the Human X Commonwealth in 1973 and 74, but 74 would also see the publication of his first novelization projects, with the printing of Luana. An American film distributor commissioned Foster to write a novelization of an Italian film from 1968 that they had just licensed and were planning to release under the title Luana the Girl Tarzan. Having been paid to produce a manuscript for a film that had not yet been translated into English, Foster watched the film in the original Italian, a language he did not speak, and then produced a novel based on what he could glean of the movie's story, and heavily influenced by the movie's poster, a stunning piece of barbarian art by master of the genre Frank Frazetta. 74 was the start of Foster working as a novelization and tie-in machine. In addition to Luana, he would publish the novelization of Dark Star, 2 novelizations of episodes of Star Trek The Animated Series, and would also write a manuscript adapting the 2-part Maud's Dilemma from the first season of Maud, although that last one would never actually make it to print. 1975 would see 3 more novelizations from Star Trek, and in 76 he would publish his next Human X Commonwealth novel, alongside an adaptation for a little indie film called Star Wars. The adaptation of what today is called Episode 4, A New Hope, was ghostwritten by Foster, but would appear in print credited to George Lucas. Later, Foster would be asked if he was troubled by not receiving credit on the Star Wars novelization, and he would brush the question aside, saying it would be akin to a contractor demanding to have his name on a Frank Lloyd Wright house. However, he would be credited in 1978 when Splinter of the Mind's Eye was published. Lucas had asked Foster to write the story, published by Del Rey, as a potential low-budget sequel to the original Star Wars film that they could then adapt if the movie turned out to not be a success. To that end, Foster wrote his story with the potential limitations in mind. Most of it was set on a mist-shrouded forest planet because finding a location would be inexpensive. No new props or ships were introduced, so that a production could simply reuse everything that had already existed. And neither Han Solo nor Chewbacca make an appearance in the story because, at the time, Harrison Ford had not signed a contract for any sequels. It was a brilliant backup plan, honestly, but by the time Splinter actually saw publication, Star Wars had already shattered box office records, and Lucas didn't have to worry about keeping his ambitions for a sequel small. In 1978, Foster wrapped up his run on Star Trek the Animated Series novelizations, and 1979's Star Trek the Motion Picture would not use his services for their novelization, but they would credit him on the film as having worked on the story. That's alright though, since 79 saw Foster writing the official adaptations for Warner's Alien and Disney's The Black Hole, and rolling into the 80s he would continue to write original works, including launching his second major series, the Spellsinger books, and also provide adaptations and tie-ins for major 80s nostalgia moments like Clash of the Titans, Outland, Krull, The Last Starfighter, and Starman, as well as producing the novelization of 1986's Aliens. He would also write 1984's Shadowkeep, broadly recognized as the first ever novelization of a video game. For the last 10 years of the 20th century, Foster's work pulled away from direct adaptations. He largely focused on original work, although he did produce a novelization of Alien 3, another video game novelization for LucasArts Interactive's The Dig, and he would still at times write media tie-ins, books that aren't directly adapted from another work, but use the characters and settings of a work to expand their universe. Among those tie-ins, he would write 2 novels set in Dinotopia for HarperCollins. Looking at Alan Dean Foster's bibliography for the time period, which you can find on his website at alandeanfoster.com, one thing is clear. Foster may not have written as many adaptations as he had in the 70s and 80s, but he definitely didn't slow down his overall output. No other period matches the whirlwind of novelizations he produced at the start of his career, but that may in part be due to a shrinking number of novelization jobs on the market. As discussed on the Film Optimist, novelizations still move units in the publishing world, but with other ways for people to latch onto their favorite movies, direct adaptations are fewer and farther between. Foster would return to novelizations in 2004, publishing The Chronicles of Riddick, and in 2007, he would adapt the Michael Bay Transformers film, and he would also adapt the first movies in what is now referred to by fans as the Kelvinverse, the Star Trek universe as depicted in the movies starting in 2009. Foster continues to write prolifically with over 120 full-length books to his name. He also finds time to indulge his love of travel and exploration, including scuba diving, and he is currently a world and Eurasian champion in powerlifting for his age and weight class. In 2015, Foster would return to novelizing Star Wars as Disney attempted to take the series back to its roots with the release of the movie and the Foster-written novelization, Episode 7, The Force Awakens. With the now Disney-owned Star Wars franchise back in business with Foster, it seemed like everything was alright, which is why it came as a surprise in 2020 when Foster alleged, with support from the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, that the Walt Disney Company had been underpaying his royalties. In a public statement, Foster said that Disney had failed to pay him royalties for his Star Wars novelizations and tie-ins, starting at their acquisition of Lucasfilm in 2012, and that since their 2019 acquisition of 20th Century Fox, they had not paid royalties on his novelizations and tie-ins for the Alien franchise. Serious allegations, considering that those novelizations are among the rare number that have remained consistently in print since their movies were released, and his tie-in work is frequently credited with helping to build those universes into the storytelling worlds that they represent today. The issue had been burning behind the scenes for some time, with Foster and the SFWA attempting to settle things quietly, first with the publishing companies directly, then moving on to talk with Disney after the publishers told them that they were the ones making the decisions. But the decision was made to take the issue public after Disney, 1, argued that they had obtained the rights to the novels but not the obligation to pay royalties on them, and 2, started requesting that Foster and his representatives agree to keep their discussions confidential, which the SFWA saw as being counter to their mission to help all science fiction and fantasy authors. With the accusations made public, more authors came forward having discovered that Disney had failed to pay them royalties owed on their novelizations and tie-ins, including Rob McGregor, who novelized Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Donald Glut, who handled The Empire Strikes Back, and James Caan, who had novelized both Return of the Jedi and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Another author, Michael A. Stackpole, came forward noting that while he was being paid for the Star Wars novels he had written, he had not received any royalties on the Star Wars comic books he had written ever since the rights for those comics had transferred from Dark Horse to Disney-owned Marvel. The story caught the eye of sci-fi and fantasy fandom, and before long the hashtag #DisneyMustPay was trending on Twitter, while the SFWA assembled a Disney Must Pay joint task force to help bring public attention to the story, enlisting, among other writers, Neil Gaiman and Chuck Wendig. Pressed for comment, a representative of Disney's finally told The Hollywood Reporter, "We are carefully reviewing whether any royalty payments may have been missed as a result of acquisition integration." In May of 2021, it was finally announced that Disney had agreed to pay its novelization and tie-in authors, including Foster, their back royalties. The SFWA, along with the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers, the International Thriller Writers, and Mystery Writers of America, continue to look for and represent authors of adaptations and tie-ins who discover that their royalties have not been paid following the acquisition of their original contracting company by a different corporation. Thanks for downloading and listening to Glen's Notebook. We'll be back in another week with more notes on movies, television, and media, and maybe some more additional material from the Film Optimist. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform it is you use to subscribe. It really helps a lot. Also, make sure to check out the Film Optimist on YouTube if you haven't already. You can learn more at filmoptimist.cu. That's filmoptimist.cyu. Until next time, watch like it means something.